What is going on, my loveliest FreeMelons? Thank you so much for joining me here on the FreeMelon Society once again. My name is Eli Martyr. Today we are going to be going into the spiritual sciences. We're going to be going into the occult world, and we're going to be giving you a lesson on not only the physical body, but the bodies of mankind. The several bodies that make up the entire human constitution. Okay? Now, we're all familiar with our physical bodies. We know we have one. We know that we have our five senses, and we use these senses and our bodies to interact with the physical world. What today's lesson is going to be about revealing to you the existence of other forms of bodies that you have, that you need in order to be a complete human being. Right? So just like you have a physical body, other bodies of varying frequencies that are contained within you, right? Permeating through you. And without these bodies, life would be just as impossible as it would be without a physical body. I'm very excited to give you this lesson. So get yourselves ready, sit down, pay attention. We're going back into the classroom and we are talking about the constitution, the full constitution of the human being today in class. So like I just said, we are very accustomed and aware of our physical bodies. We have our five senses, and we are very aware of our physical bodies and our physicality because of our five senses. Our five senses decode the information in the physical world and translate them into impressions that we can immediately recognize. The difficulty in accepting that there are other bodies, just like your physical body, that make up your entire constitution, if you understand what I mean by that. The difficulty in that is that they lay in a frequency that is outside of the range of your physical senses to perceive, okay? Because of that difficulty, these bodies have not received the recognition from all forms of schooling that they should, which is something that I'm hoping to correct in this lesson. The existence of these bodies is not conjecture, it's not opinion, it's not ramblings, it's not dream material kind of being interpreted in various ways. No, this is a science. This is a spiritual science. It is no different than the study of anatomy. It is simply anatomy taken to other frequency levels that can be predictably and accurately measured, albeit that with tools that are not as familiar with us today. But this is a science, so I'm not coming to you with opinion on this, okay, if you understand. How do we know of the existence of these things? Just to reiterate. So like I said, we have our five senses, and we have technology and tools that expand our five senses into deeper and deeper realms. So we have our visual sense, right? But we have a microscope, and with a microscope, we can enhance our visual capacity to a range that's not natural to us. So we look in the microscope, we see atoms and we see molecules and whatnot, okay? So that's how we know everything in the scientific literature, right? With what we can observe with our senses. The irony here is that the occult schools of antiquity have always taught, since the dawn of mankind, there have been schools, okay? Schools that have been open to initiates to teach them how to use a technology that is infinitely superior, vastly superior than any form of technology that we understand today, any form of physical technology. And that bit of technology is human consciousness. Human consciousness is infinite. There is no limit to what it can perceive if the ability is cultivated. If the body, if the mind are sensitized under certain conditions, then it can be used to pierce the veil and to obtain information from varying frequencies outside of the one that contains merely physical reality. These esoteric schools had to go underground for particular reasons. A lot of divination sciences and whatnot were a very large threat to the religious institutions that were popping up, you know, the big three religions that popped up eventually in human history. And divination sciences were a large threat to them because these occult schools taught the truth of nature and the truth of God. The truth about God and the truth about all these things, and how these things are largely an internal power rather than an external power that you need to consult for all your questions and answers and whatnot. For now, suffice to say that these few occult schools that taught the science of spirituality and the methods by which you could train these other bodies, they were sequestered, isolated, very often hunted down and killed, and witch hunts and all that comes from this. But make no mistake, this is in fact a science, okay? How did we come to the knowledge of these sciences? The adepts and the hierophants of old who were taught this information and learned how to use consciousness as a technology with which to discover the truths about the body. The natural principles that they acquired found corroboration all over the world and in all different occult schools, even that had no relation to one another, came to the same understandings. Because, again, this is a truth. It's not a subjective opinion. All of the adepts that were able to read the non-physical world would see the same thing. Because it's a commonality amongst all life. So you had corroboration amongst the occult schools. We had the continual corroboration of those natural principles by modern day adepts who discovered and saw and verified the exact same things. And we also have the benefit of scientific corroboration. So science has slowly been able to help us verify what the ancients taught about the spiritual sciences. So we have many ways of corroborating this. Again, you're not going to find this in a university textbook, obviously, because this information does not fall in line with a very insidious agenda for the subjugation of the entire human species. So that has control of entertainment, media, school, medicine, all this. I'm not going to go into it, but you get the idea. I want to read you a quote from my favorite theosophist, esoteric philosophist, C.W. Leadbeater. What he's talking about here is the faculty of clairvoyance. Okay, so let me read you what he's saying here. If a blind man came up to us and assured us that there was no such thing as ordinary physical sight, and that we were deluded in supposing that we possessed this faculty, we in our turn should probably not feel it very worthwhile to argue at great length in defense of our supposed delusion. We should simply say, I certainly do see, and it is useless to try to persuade me that I do not. All the daily experiences of my life show me that I do. I decline to be argued out of my definite knowledge of positive facts. Now, this is precisely how the trained clairvoyant feels. Now, listen to this. Now, this is precisely how the trained clairvoyant feels when ignorant people serenely pronounce that it is quite impossible that he should possess a power which he is at the very moment using to read the thoughts of those who deny it to him. That's C.W. Leadbeater. So basically what he's saying is people who have cultivated the ability of clairvoyance, when people who don't have that ability say, oh, well, you can't be seeing anything because I can't see it. He's saying it's just as ridiculous as a blind guy coming up to you and saying, hey, there is no physical world. There's just blackness. No, there is a physical world because I can see it. Well, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. The only thing that separates these two people is ability, is a question of ability or tools with which to perceive. Okay, that which is unperceived by someone who does not have that tool or does not have that sophistication of faculty. Okay? Now, you'll excuse this preamble, but you understand, when you're talking about things like this, so many people are going to dismiss this as woo-woo, okay? And just like New Age mumbo-jumbo, all right? There is a lot of New Age mumbo-jumbo out there, okay? And there's a lot of deception in the New Age community. What I'm talking about in this lecture is not that deception, okay? And it's important for me to set the tone and set the groundwork so that we are all on the same page as we go through this lecture. Okay, so I can clearly show you that this is not just nonsense. Before we get going, I must make two agreements with you. You and I have to agree on at least two principles, two natural law principles. And if we can agree on that, then we can continue with the lecture. If you cannot agree to these two agreements that I have set out, you may as well turn off the lecture now because there's no point in going any further. It would be like arguing morality with a psychopath, okay? And trying to convince a psychopath that killing for no reason is wrong. If the psychopath does not have the ability to at all recognize what is right and wrong about killing and not killing, then, the conversation is useless, right? So we have to at least agree on the bare minimum. If you don't, that's fine. But I'm just telling you right now, the rest of the lecture is meaningless if you can't agree to the following two points, okay? So, agreement number 1. There exist phenomena, realities, energies, and natural occurrences whose plane of action lie outside of our five-sense ability to perceive them. And just because these phenomena are not available to our immediate biological sensory tools does not negate their objective reality. Okay? Now, there should be nothing wrong with you agreeing to this. We have examples of this every single day. What is the internet? Can I see or hear or touch or taste the internet as I'm walking down the street? No, I cannot. But the information must be there somewhere because I can access internet wherever I have a tool with which to decode the frequencies that are all permeated throughout the air. So there is information everywhere, but you have no sensory ability to be able to decode that. You need a tool. You need an instrument, okay? Radio frequencies, television frequencies, these all operate under the same parameters. These objective bits of information that are everywhere, but you cannot perceive them, yet you know that they exist, okay? So if you can agree with that statement, we can move on. This is agreement number 2. In order to make meaningful interaction with a particular environment, a vehicle, body, or other type of mechanism is required with which to take action through in order to work within the parameters of that environment. What do I mean by that? You live on planet Earth. Planet Earth is a physical phenomenon. In order to interact with physical phenomena, here, I got a charger, okay? In order for me to do this, right, I can't do any of this. I can't manipulate this object unless I am operating in a vehicle that is in harmony with the vibrational frequency that this is in. Okay? So I need a physical body in order to be physical with the physical world. I know it's pretty obvious, but bear with me. I made a video about scuba diving recently. I do not have a physical vehicle that is suited to the underwater environment. So what must happen? I must create a tool, a body with which I operate that is suitable for that underwater environment because I cannot breathe water. So you throw on a wetsuit and you throw on diving equipment and you go under the water and you can now breathe underwater. Without the diving suit, I cannot interact with the underwater environment because that is outside of the capacity and range of my physical body. Understand? Okay. If I want to go into outer space, my physical body is not compatible with the conditions of outer space. So what must happen? You require a body or some sort of tool with which you may interact with that environment, that new environment. Okay, so I throw on a spacesuit. Now in that new body, I am able to interact with the outer space world. To use an even simpler analogy, if I want to get from point A to B on the highway, do you do that by just going into the middle of the highway and sprinting or running? No, right? There's a certain condition set by the highway. So you need a vehicle with which to operate properly in that environment. So now you can move at the same speed the cars are going. It doesn't work if you don't have the proper vehicle. And this car analogy is going to be very important because it is so applicable to what we are going to be talking about. So keep this car analogy in mind. You are the person, the whole thinking, interacting, living person, and you get into a vehicle, and now the vehicle becomes an extension of your temperaments and thoughts and feelings and whatnot. Okay, so those are the two agreements. Things exist, and they don't not exist just because you can't see them or perceive them, and that you need a vehicle with which to interact with a particular environment. Okay? If you can agree to those two things, we may now proceed to the actual meat and potatoes of the lesson. So I've got a diagram here that I'm going to flash on the screen right now for you. I'll go through this and I'll explain, kind of what you're looking at. But essentially, this is a breakdown of the different bodies starting from the lowest vibrational body, which would be our physical body. See at the bottom where it says the dense body? Okay, way at the bottom here. The dense body, that's what we are. Okay, that's what our physical bodies are operating in. And as you go higher and higher and higher, the frequency band or the frequency world that these bodies operate in and exist in is shown here by these different categorizations. And I'll go through this for you so that you guys understand. Now, frequency and vibration are very, very similar terms. They refer to the same thing. Scientifically, you can understand vibration as something like cycles per second or hertz per second or units per second, right? So it's so you can mathematically understand this too. There is a numerological basis for understanding the physical world or the spiritual world, just as much as there is a vibrational modality for understanding that same world. It turns out that creation, the force of creation, has favored certain numerological patterns in the creation of the world. One of those numerological phenomena that creation prefers is the number 7. Now, I'm not going to get into this extensively, but the pattern of 7 and multiples of 7, there's something about that number that you can find in all things, in all physical things and non-physical things. Nature just seems to prefer the number 7 for whatever reason. For example, you have 7 cervical vertebrae, okay, in your neck. You have 7 endocrine glands in your body. You also have 7 chakras. These 7 chakras are associated with the 7 endocrine glands. The 7 chakras are part of your non-physical bodies, not your physical, but your non-physical bodies that are attached energetically, electromagnetically to each endocrine gland. After a rainy day, look up in the sky. What do you see? You see a beautiful rainbow created by nature, having nothing to do with human interaction or whatever. What do you see? You see a perfect spread of 7 colors. Perfectly produced by nature, okay? So if you look at the diagram, you'll see that each of the levels are broken up into 7 levels. And that is because, again, the natural principle of as above, so below, which was recognized way, way, way in our past. We've recognized certain natural principles, and we can build on those and use those to enhance our understanding of physical phenomena. Understanding as above, so below, and learning of this number that nature prefers to use in creation, it was recognized through study that there were 7 levels associated with all of these frequency bands that make up life. So let's look at the physical world and see those 7 levels, okay? Those first 7 levels. And then in discussion of the other levels, it won't be as detailed, but I just want to expose you to their existence, okay? The first 3 levels of the physical world. First 3 out of 7. The first 3 levels, we have solids, liquids, and gases. We're very familiar with this. We see this every day. Solid, liquid, gas. Okay, these are the fundamental states of matter in the physical world. Our bodies are made of solid, liquids, and gases. I don't have to explain this to you. Terminologically speaking, we can refer to these first 3 levels, these solid, liquid, gas, as the chemical region. Okay, so the chemical region of physical reality. Now, the next 4 levels above the physical world, we have the etheric region, or etheric region, however you want to pronounce it. Your body has an etheric body that corresponds to this frequency band of physical reality. We're still in the physical world, right? But we're just at slightly varying frequencies above the gaseous state. So at the 4th layer, the 4th frequency band above the solid state, you have something that's called the chemical ether. Okay, so this is plane number 4, just above the gaseous state. Because this is the very first band above the gaseous state. Now you recognize that you can see smoke, or you can see gas with your eyes. Okay, someone's smoking and you can see gas. All right, gas is just playing on the border of the limit of our physical sense of sight. The chemical ether is just above that. Now, being so close to what we can see and what we can't see, you can actually learn. Anybody can learn to see the chemical ether. The chemical ether is a field around your body. It extends about maybe 6 inches or so around the body. And you can actually see it. Yes, you can. Go into a dimly lit room and grab some sort of black surface or dark surface. And you very, very lazily, not focusing on anything in particular, just kind of generally look at, let's say, your finger or your hand. Eventually, what you'll notice, you'll notice something like gas, but not really. Something like cigarette smoke. You know, when cigarette smoke is billowing, just before it disappears into the air. You'll see something like that, and something that kind of looks like an artist's rendition of electromagnetism. Okay, so somewhere in between those, you'll see that dancing around your hand or dancing in between your two fingers. This is a really good way to practice seeing your etheric body, okay? It is one of your bodies. It operates in the physical world in the levels above the chemical region of the physical world, okay? So you have an etheric body. Physical body, slight frequency above it, etheric body. Another name for the etheric body you could call the vital body, okay? The vital body encompasses the body that plays on all of those different frequencies above the first 3 of the physical world. The importance of the vital body is it is the link between your physical body and the next major body above the physical, right? Your astral body. Without this link, you could not be human. You could not interact with this plane because all of your other higher faculties come from higher frequency bands. So I'm going to give you a brief description of each of these 4 levels, okay? The lowest of the etheric planes is the chemical ether. At this particular frequency range of your vital body, the responsibility of this plane is to take care of the powers of assimilation and elimination. So digestion and elimination. Like the battery that powers a toy car or whatnot, these energy fields, these bodily energy fields are responsible for certain processes in your physical body. Someone studying anatomy, for example, or physiology can tell you, yeah, you bite into an apple, the apple goes into you, and then your body just breaks it down and what, okay. Where is the intelligence coming from that knows how to do all of that, right? That knows how to flex your GI tract and move the thing down and release this chemical and release that chemical and break down this protein and create that enzyme and then have this enzyme, do this. It's this ridiculously complex process. Now, where does the intelligence come with which to do that? Well, it is coming from higher intelligences that are hardwired to your body that come from these higher frequency bands. Okay? You cannot explain this with physicality alone. So at this level, it is taking care of that human phenomenon of digestion and elimination, right? If we move above that a level, we come to what is called the life ether. The energy at this level, the frequency at this level is responsible for all of the phenomenon of propagation, of continuing the species, phenomenon of sexual attraction and sexual repulsion. These are very polarized energies, right? Just like we said, positive and negative, male, female, hot, cold, this dualistic principle. This is a fundamental fact of nature that echoes through all frequency bands, all forms of spiritual and physical reality. Always this dualistic principle and the energy that keeps these dual principles in play. It's the tension between them that drives the physical world, right? Male, female. This is the quintessential example, the best example of this very obvious dualistic force in nature, the two. Females, for example, will have a greater abundance of positive energy, okay? And males will have negative energy, negative polarity, and it's not negative in the sense of bad, but just polarity. So like electromagnetically negative. And that is responsible for action, work, change, causing change to happen. The negative polarity is the action polarity. The positive polarity is an internal energy responsible for growth maintenance, this kind of thing. So females embody this polarity and males embody this polarity. This is why physically males and females are so different, right? Males have an energy of action, they have an active force. This is why the male body is constructed the way it is. Greater muscle mass, greater ability for speed and agility and all these kind of things. This is a male principle because it's the active negative polarity that is embodied in the male body, and the female body is different, right? The female body is geared for growth and maturation, propagation of the species, nurturing, loving. It's a harmonizing force. All these wonderful characteristics that the world of social engineering is desperately trying to breed out of females completely through, all sorts of manipulation techniques that we can talk about some other time. The next level up could be called the light ether. And again, the terminology for these is not important because they're going to be different in all different occult schools. These terms that I'm giving you, I believe, are Rosicrucian terminologies, but again, you'll find corresponding terminologies in all different types of occult schools. That's not the point. The point is knowing that they're there and that they exist. So then you have the light ether, right? This level of the ether is responsible for the energy that governs the senses and all of the different sensual capacities in the human. This is taken care of through this band of frequency. Then you have one final rung above that, still in the physical world, but dealing with the 4 levels that make up the vital body. You have one final body above that layer. Or, well, I shouldn't really say body. I should say region, or I should say layer, right? Because the body, the entire body, is the vital body, which makes up the 4 layers above the first 3 layers down at the chemical region. So it's the vital body that encompasses all of these levels, but each of these levels have different responsibilities. So this final layer, right, in the vital body is the reflecting ether, and this takes care of faculties of memory. So all of the different types of abilities that we have that are associated with the storage of information, this layer is what is taking care of that within your vital body. Now, in the beginning of the 20th century, 1906, there was a doctor named Dr. McDougall, made a series of experiments at the Massachusetts General Hospital. And he wanted to find out if there's something that we can't see that leaves the body after you die. So he had a particularly sensitive mechanism for weighing a person and went to the hospital. And when people were dying, he would have them, lie down on this and then have their final moments on this mechanism. And what he noticed was that in human beings, when humans died, at precisely the moment that they were pronounced dead, there was a drop in weight, in body weight. And this was corroborated amongst many, many people. So every time you pass away, a human being passes away, there is a drop in the total amount of body weight that you can only notice if you have a sensitive enough measuring tool in terms of weight. What is it that leaves the human body when it passes away? What passes away is this body. This etheric body dissipates, disconnects from the physical because the job is done. It disconnects and leaves. And because it's still a physical entity, it has weight, but a very, very small amount of weight. Now, he replicated this experiment with animals. Now, what did he find? He found that animals, he could not see any particular noticeable drop in weight when an animal passed away, which led to the misconception that has propagated over the years that animals don't have souls. Okay? They didn't know any better, and they just equated this dissipation of the chemical body as the soul. Okay, it is not the soul. The soul is a much higher phenomenon. This is just the electromagnetic body that attaches immediately to the physical. Animals have this etheric body as well, but it is not as developed in the animal as it is in the human being. Later on, this experiment was replicated with a more sensitive tool, and then it was found that, there is a drop in weight when an animal passes away. It's just not as much weight as the human etheric body. Now, this is something that I can talk about another day, but if you look on our Four Kingdoms chart, you'll notice that on the right side, you see the certain non-physical bodies of certain physical entities. So at the mineral level, they all have bodies, plants, animals, and man. They all have non-physical counterparts to their bodies. But you'll notice that the physical counterpart of man reaches much, much, much higher into the high frequency band than the animals do. Okay? It has to do with spiritual evolution. The reason you are a human being and that you have these fantastic mental capabilities, it's because of the spiritual evolution, the degree of complexity and maturation of the non-physical bodies has had more time to develop in the human being rather than in the animal. So the animal has only a little bit of development, right, in the non-physical bodies, but in humans, there's a lot of development, and that's what makes us human beings, right? And what makes our animal brothers not as intelligent, not as gifted, not because they don't have souls, because they're not as developed non-physically. If we go up from the physical world, we find ourselves now in the astral plane, okay? In the astral world. You have a body corresponding to the astral. So just like we have a physical body to interact with the physical world, at this level, this new set of 7, you have an astral body that does everything in the astral world and corresponds to your body. It is your astral counterpart. When you go to sleep in the evening to recharge your batteries for the next day, your consciousness, which is a multi-dimensional, multi-frequency thing, very complex, very difficult to describe. What happens with your consciousness is your consciousness leaves or can leave your physical body. You recognize that when you sleep, you are not conscious, okay? Why are you not conscious? Because your consciousness has left your physical body. So now there can be no human behavior, right? What makes you you is now out of your physical body. And your consciousness goes into your astral body and some of the other higher bodies beyond the astral plane. But it primarily goes into your astral body. That is why when you go to sleep and you start dreaming, you now have conscious recollection of many of your dreams because your consciousness was now steering a different vehicle. Just like you jump into a car and you drive the car around, you are now in the car vehicle. Okay? You are not running around, you're not exercising, you're in a different vehicle. Your consciousness goes into the astral vehicle, so you have consciousness in that plane. In that state, now you find you're recollecting dreams when you're sleeping. And that is why you're unconscious when you're sleeping and you're conscious in a different vehicle, in a different frequency band of reality. Reality, not non-reality, reality. The astral body, in some schools of thought, is also considered the desire body. It is the plane of emotionality. So all of our emotions that we experience as human beings, okay, this whole emotional gamut, right, this spectrum of emotion that we as human beings play with every single day, the body that is responsible for all of that is the astral body. All of the physical things we do, our physical body is responsible for that. All of the emotional things that we do, the astral body is responsible for that. Hypothetically speaking, if you had no astral body, but you still had a vital body and a physical body, then you would walk around life like this. There would just be nothing. There would be nothing to motivate you to do anything. You would have no moral compass. You would have no incentive to do much. You would have no thoughts or feelings about staying alive or not staying alive. If someone held a gun to your head, you would do this. You want to kill me? I see. Like, there would be nothing. There would be and so without this body, you would have no drive to continue your evolutionary path, right? So if you didn't have that body, you would not be able to experience anything that takes place on that plane, right? Do you see what I mean? Do you see how simply this makes sense? When you understand as above, so below, you understand the concept of jumping in a car and driving, and that's a vehicle that you use to. So if you understand that concept, it's the same thing all throughout the scale, right? It's so simple, but complex. That's nature's most amazing trick. Infinite complexity, but brutal simplicity. That is natural law. That's how the whole game works. And it's amazing when you start learning about this kind of stuff. the next entire plane above the astral plane, okay? So we've got the 7 levels of the astral plane, and all of those bodies have different responsibilities. I'm not going to go into it, all right? But the next 7, now you have the mental plane. All of the mental processes, right? The thought processes, the creative processes, anything that has to do with the mentality and thinking, all right? You have a body that is responsible for all of that. Emotionality is a different wavelength, a different frequency. Thought, creating thought, deciding that you want to make a chair and pulling that creative matter, and formulating it, right? All that is energy. It exists, just like radio waves exist in the air, but you can't see them. Mental energy is a type of energy. It exists. And you have a body hardwired in you, right? Part of you that makes up your constitution that exists at that particular frequency. There is no such thing as creation without first an existence in the world of thought. In order for anything in the physical world to be created, it needs to exist at a higher level first, in the level of thought, and it has to trickle down into the physical world first, okay? Just try to do any creative thing without thinking about it first. Impossible. It cannot happen. Cannot, never will, ever happen. This is a creational fundamental principle. Hypothetically speaking, if you had no mental body, but you had an astral body, a vital body, and a physical body, you might now experience emotion, but you couldn't think of anything in particular. You could not create, right? You could not exercise any creative capacity at all, right? Because the body just would not exist. You might feel a certain way about it, but you wouldn't be able to act in any sort of higher mental way, right? So all of the incredible mental processes that make us human, that distinguish us from the animals, right? So animals have a very, very, very limited mental body evolution, mental body sophistication. Human beings have a much more developed mental body. Okay, that has been in the process of evolution for a particular amount of time. Okay, so I need to start wrapping this up. This is just an introduction, but I hope you can understand now that if you understand that you have a physical body and that you interact with the physical world in that body, you now have what you need to understand how your etheric body is a body, your astral body is a body, and your mental body is a body. You use all of these bodies in order to do all of the things that make you human. What helps us to corroborate this information is that when you go to sleep, your consciousness leaves your physical body, so now you are no longer able to do anything on the physical plane because you yourself has left the physical vehicle and now goes and explores another vehicle and does work on that plane. No different than jumping in the car and the car becoming an extension of you. That is what's happening. That is how it works. I hope you take this understanding and you go and explore and study, broaden yourself, broaden your understanding in this field. It is a fascinating field, and I hope that I've given you what you need to make further leaps in your evolution, studying this wonderful, wonderful body of knowledge. Thank you so much for sitting with me on this one, guys. My name is Eli Martyr once again. If you liked this video and if you got something out of it, make sure to subscribe. Give me a thumbs up. It took me some time to put this together, so hopefully you appreciate that. Class is over for today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time here in the secret classroom on the FreeMelon Society.